The sun was high over the city when the moment that would shatter and rebuild a man's heart unfolded. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon for Cairo Benton, a hard-working single father who had just finished a double shift and was rushing to pick up his 8-year-old son, Avon. But life doesn't always ask permission before it rewrites your story. As Cairo turned the corner onto Maplecrest Avenue, he saw something, or rather, someone, that made his breath freeze and his knees weaken. There, sitting on the rough concrete beside a flickering street lamp, hair tangled, clothes torn, eyes lowered in shame, was the woman who had once promised him forever, his ex-wife Zara. A cardboard sign rested in her trembling hands, hungry, lost everything, anything helps. And in that single moment, under the heat of the daylight and the noise of passing strangers, Cairo felt his heart fracture in a way he never knew it still could. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your support helps stories like this reach others who may need their own reminder of hope. Cairo stood frozen in place, the world around him blurred, the honking cars, the murmur of people, the distant bark of a street vendor advertising his food. Everything dulled beneath the heavy thud of his racing heart. Zara had once been vibrant, joyful, full of dreams that shined brighter than the city lights. But now she looked like a shadow of who she once was, her gaze distant, her cheeks hollow. The sight tore open old wounds he'd spent years stitching shut. Their marriage had unraveled the way storms often do, low at first, then suddenly destructive. She had struggled with untreated depression, fallen into the wrong crowd, and ultimately walked out on their family, leaving Cairo alone with Avon. It had taken years of sleepless nights, relentless work, and sheer willpower for him to rebuild a life for their son. Seeing Zara like this resurfaced not anger, but unimaginable ache. He wanted to walk away. He had every right to, but his feet moved toward her as if carried by something larger than pride. Zara didn't even look up. Only when his shadow covered her did her eyes lift, and the moment her gaze touched his, something inside her crumbled. Tears spilled instantly, her shoulders shaking as she whispered his name like a confession she'd been waiting years to release. Cairo felt a tightness in his throat, but he steadied himself, lowering to her level. He noticed the bruises on her arms, the blistered skin on her hands, the fear in her expression. She tried to explain, broken sentences, shame, soaked apologies, fragmented pieces of the nightmare she had fallen into. She had trusted people who exploited her, lost her job, stumbled into homelessness, and eventually became too ashamed to reach out to the family she'd abandoned. Cairo listened, not with softness but with the firm, grounded calm of a man who had learned to survive pain. He didn't forgive her in that moment, but he couldn't ignore her suffering either. He stood, extended his hand, and told her simply, "Come on, you need to get off this street." Zara hesitated, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if expecting him to pull back. But he didn't, and slowly, tentatively, she placed her trembling hand in his. He drove her to the small apartment he shared with Avon. The hallway smelled like detergent and old carpet cleaner, but it was home, a sanctuary he had built inch by inch. Avon, hearing the door open, rushed toward him with his usual energy, but paused when he saw the unfamiliar woman behind his father. He recognized her from the single photo Cairo kept, his mother. The confusion in the boy's eyes made Zara break again, tears streaming silently as she whispered an apology meant for the years she had missed. Cairo gently guided Avon into the bedroom and explained everything in simple, careful words, the truth, but softened enough to protect his son's heart. The days that followed were heavy, beautiful, and complicated. Cairo let Zara sleep on the couch. She showered, ate real meals, and cried often, sometimes quietly, sometimes loud enough that her sobs echoed through the apartment walls. She talked to Avon in small doses, slowly earning back pieces of trust from a child who had learned not to expect too much. And through it all, Cairo watched, remembering the woman she once was and observing the broken version she had become. He didn't want her presence to destroy the stability he'd finally created for Avon, but he couldn't ignore how she helped with small things, washing dishes, folding laundry, humming softly while brushing Avon's hair before school. There was a gentleness returning to her, fragile but real. And there were nights when, after Avon was asleep, Zara would sit across the room, speaking softly about the darkness she had drowned in. How regret haunted her more than any cold night spent alone on the streets. Cairo listened, conflicted, trying to balance boundaries with compassion. One afternoon, as sunlight poured warm gold through the living room window, Zara approached Cairo with a piece of paper in her hand, a brochure for a local recovery and counseling center. She told him she wanted to get help, not to win him back, not to disrupt his life, but because she wanted to become someone her son could be proud of. Her voice trembled, but there was determination beneath the fear. Cairo felt a weight shift in him. She was choosing the hard road, the honest road. He nodded, agreeing to drive her. Recovery wasn't a cinematic transformation. It was messy, exhausting, filled with setbacks. Some days Zara returned from sessions energized, hopeful. Other days she came home quiet, worn down by memories she could no longer numb, but she kept going, week after week, month after month. Slowly, visibly, she began to rebuild herself. Avon started smiling more around her. She found part-time work at a cafe. She laughed again, soft, hesitant but real, and Cairo. He found his anger dissolving, replaced by a cautious respect. She wasn't the woman who left. She was someone fighting to be better. 6 months after that day on Maplecrest Avenue, Zara sat across the kitchen table from Cairo, sunlight illuminating her face. She looked healthier, stronger, grounded. She thanked him, not dramatically, not with tears this time, but with sincere gratitude. She told him she was moving into a small shared apartment near her counseling center. It was a step toward independence, a step toward a future she hoped to build for herself. Cairo felt a mix of pride and sadness. He knew this was right. She needed her own space, and so did he. But as Avon wrapped his arms around her, giggling as she lifted him, Cairo realized something profound. Second chances were not about erasing the past, but about choosing not to be imprisoned by it. The day Zara moved out, the city sky was bright and blue, filled with the promise of beginnings. As Cairo helped carry her final box to the car, she stopped beside him. She told him he had saved her life, not by loving her again, not by forgetting what happened, but by offering basic human dignity when she least deserved it. He shook his head, telling her that saving herself was the hard part. He had only opened a door she chose to walk through. As she drove away, Avon waved enthusiastically, shouting that he'd see her on Friday. Cairo watched the car disappear into traffic, then exhaled a long breath. Life moved differently now, softer, steadier, more hopeful. He understood that love didn't always look like romantic reunion. Sometimes it looked like forgiveness, boundaries, compassion, and letting someone grow separate from you. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your engagement helps these real human stories reach the people who need them most, and before we end, please comment, every soul deserves a second sunrise. Thank you for watching, thank you for feeling, and thank you for being part of this light.